I started out last week writing about rig counts compared to commodity prices here in the US. I picked a view of just oil-directed drilling rig count against oil prices and gas-directed drilling rig count against gas prices. And we've seen that both of these trajectories have flatlined. Both oil and gas drilling rig counts had their peaks in the fall of 2022, and they have since declined. Oil's down about 6%, the rig count is. Gas rigs are down about 3%. So we're seeing this flat to slightly down trajectory on the rig count side. And I wrote about how there's no immediate inflection, reason catalyst on the horizon that we should expect some sort of inflection off this trajectory that we're on now. My next post was about CF Industries, and that is a huge ammonia producer located here in the US. They released their earnings results this week. And what's interesting is when you go back and look at their revenue trajectory since 2018 and follow it through to today, it maps almost exactly what you see from the producer price index for ammonia. So my point in that post was, yes, management teams matter in commodities businesses. They particularly matter around the margins to make sure that you're getting the kind of performance that you would expect to get. But the problem is your performance in aggregate is locked down by what's happening on the supply-demand balance around these commodities, which are things that these management teams certainly don't control. So it's an interesting predicament to be in when the bulk of your company's performance is basically an option against commodity pricing that you don't control. My next post was about a podcast that I just listened to for the first time this week, and it was very much a shame on me because the podcast is great, and I should have been listening to it far before now. But it's called COB Tuesday, Close of Business Tuesday. And I recommended an episode specifically, an interview with Jigar Shah, who's the director of the Loan Programs Office at the U.S. Department of Energy. And the Loan Programs Office is designed to help commercialize new energy technologies. And Jigar Shah's personal story is interesting, and his road into the LPO, and then his descriptions of the LPO's mandate and how his office collaborates with the innovators and entrepreneurs in this country that are driving the energy transition. So just a fascinating way to think about how we commercialize new technologies in this country. And Jigar Shah is just an incredibly charismatic and compelling person to listen to. So that podcast episode, easily a top 5 episode that I've listened to in the past 12 months. I really couldn't recommend it too much more strongly. My next post was about Phillips 66, the huge independent petroleum refiner here in the US. They released their earnings this week, and they got a question from one of the analysts about their utilization. And specifically, it was a bit of a celebration about Phillips improving utilization levels. And I kind of poo-pooed that in the post and said, yes, it's a little bit better than it was, but they're just a tick above Marathon, and they're meaningfully behind Valero. But when you looked at the results that you got out of HollyFrontier and PBF later in the week, you realize, okay, Phillips's utilization was actually more impressive than I first thought, given the relatively weak utilization levels that we saw out of those other two independent petroleum refiners. The next post was about the renewable units that we're adding to the U.S. electrical grid. And this came as an inspiration from one of the episodes, one of the podcast interviews that I'd heard with Jigar Shah, where he passed along an anecdote that say nominally 80% of new adds to the U.S. electrical grid are fueled by renewables. So I looked at the additions that we've had in January and February this year, the data that we have year to date. And sure enough, I think something like 70% of the new adds in those 2 months came from renewables. So very much in line with what Mr. Shah had seen in his own experience leading the loan program office. That motivated my next post, which was Friday, where I looked at the new power plant additions over the trailing 12 months. And there you get to 76% fueled by renewables. So again, that's quite close to the 80% anecdote that Jigar Shah had shared. And what that means is a monthly average rate, we're adding about 2 gigawatts of renewables to the electrical grid. We're adding about 0.6 gigawatts of fossil fuels, which is almost exclusively natural gas. So these are good anecdotes to have in your head as you're thinking about the energy transition, as you're thinking about how the electrical grid is evolving. Nominally today, something like 20% of the electricity in the U.S. comes from renewables, but we're adding 76% of the new adds are in renewables. So you can see we're leaning heavily into that space, and that's how you get to a transformation. As always, I send out a weekly newsletter that has links to and summaries of all of these research pieces. And that way, if you happen to miss something on LinkedIn, you can be sure to find a list of everything that I've produced. I also include an anecdote, insight, or observation in each newsletter that I only share in that newsletter. I don't share it elsewhere, so that even if you've seen all the LinkedIn stuff that I happen to do over the course of the week, and you get the newsletter, there will still be something new for you in there. And I actually had recommended another podcast interview as part of the Anecdote Insight Observation. Specifically, it's the Energy Transition Show that Chris Nelder has, and it was a phenomenal interview. I sent that out today as part of the newsletter. So if you are interested in seeing all the research that I do, if you're interested in having a new energy-focused Anecdote Insight Observation, definitely sign up for the newsletter, totally free. I'll put the links in the comments below. I hope you had a great week, and we will talk soon.